Jack Callahan stood at the mouth of the cave, shoulders squared, boots planted in thick Appalachian mud. Evening mist crept in from the pines, trailing fingers over the decaying shack at his back. His hand rested unconsciously on the head of Ghost, his German shepherd, who'd frozen, ears up, hackles stiff. The wind shifted, cold and metallic, drawing out the echo of a memory that Jack couldn't seem to silence. He hadn't wanted to come here. He hadn't wanted to leave Raleigh, the cramped apartment, the safe cocoon of routine and memory. But when the letter arrived, his grandfather's scratchy script, a legal seal pressed into yellowing paper, he'd packed up what was left of his life and followed the old, winding roads into these mountains. The deed was simple enough. 10 acres, a falling-down shack, and a patch of land everyone in Ashford called cursed or useless. But his grandfather's words still haunted him. "There are things beneath this mountain, Jack, that only you can set right." Jack sucked in the mountain air. His chest felt tight, heavier than any rucksack he'd carried through dust or gunfire. Ghost let out a low, uncertain whine. For a moment, Jack's mind flickered back. Sarah, frail in her hospice bed, squeezing his hand, her smile softening the sharpness of death. "You'll be okay," she'd whispered. "Find something worth saving, Jack. Don't stay stuck." But what did she know of empty houses, abandoned hope, or a man who'd outlived every reason to go home? Inside the shack, Jack paused at the warped threshold, boots scuffing the battered boards. Dust motes swirled in the dying light. He scanned the place with a cop's eye. Instinct never left you. Everything felt untouched, yet watched. Ghost padded in behind, his claws tapping on cracked linoleum. On the stone mantel sat a battered oil lamp and a stack of old hunting magazines. Nothing seemed valuable, nothing out of place, until Jack noticed the gap between the floorboards behind the stove. Kneeling, he pried loose a splintered plank. There, wrapped in oilcloth, was a rotting leather journal. Pages flaked at his touch, but the first was clear enough to read, "Ashford's Burden, 1865. Underneath, a folded map, drawn in tight, looping hand, marked with a cipher Jack couldn't decipher. A chill passed through him. His hands shook. Ghost pressed close, nose nudging his thigh. The dog's amber eyes glowed, half wild, half familiar. As dusk deepened, Jack sat at the rickety table, the journal and map spread before him. The lamp threw shadows against the bare log walls. Every creak, every distant owl call felt magnified. His thoughts spun back through his grandfather's war stories. Rumors of gold, soldiers gone missing, family secrets nobody wanted to claim. Had Arthur Callahan lost his mind, or was he trying to warn Jack? Outside, the night thickened. The forest seemed to breathe, alive, indifferent. Ghost circled the door, head low, as if guarding against something he couldn't name. Jack's mind tugged between past and present. The hospital room's sterile silence, the echo of his wife's voice, the bitterness of old battles fought and lost. Here, in this forgotten corner of the world, regret and hope tangled together like roots beneath the mountain. Ghost suddenly tensed. Jack stiffened, hand dropping to the sidearm he still carried from his days on the force. For a moment, the world stood still. Ghost's gaze locked on the cave, his body a silent warning. Something was out there, just beyond sight, watching. Jack rose, heart pounding, not with fear, but with something like purpose. He wasn't a man who believed in fate, but in the silence, with Ghost's unwavering presence beside him, Jack found himself wondering if this worthless land held more than old bones and bad memories. He ran a thumb over the worn map, tracing the coded marks his grandfather had left behind. Ashford's burden. The phrase nagged at him. Promise or curse, he couldn't tell. But as the wind howled through the trees and the lamp flickered, Jack knew he'd crossed a threshold. There would be no turning back. Out in the dark, something unseen moved in the undergrowth. Ghost growled, deep and certain, the sound anchoring Jack to the present. What is really hidden within this worthless land, and why did Arthur believe only Jack could handle it? Jack closed his eyes, letting the question hang in the air, unanswerable. For now. He placed a hand on Ghost's head, the dog leaning into his touch, warm and real against the cold of the unknown. And somewhere, beneath earth and memory, a secret waited to be unearthed. The first blue edge of dawn sliced through the pines when Jack woke, mind fogged by fragments of Sarah's voice and the relentless ache in his back. The shack was colder now, as if the night had pressed its weight through every crack. Ghost sat rigid at the door, chest rising and falling, ears twitching at each brush of wind. Jack's hand found the pistol on the table before he realized he'd reached for it. He let Ghost out first. The dog moved with cautious authority, nose to the ground, tail stiff. Jack followed, boots crunching over a thin frost. That's when he saw it, half hidden in the muddy path leading to the cave, a set of boot prints, not his, not old, fresh, leading toward the cave's jagged mouth and doubling back. Jack's pulse spiked. Instinct kicked in, the training from years as a ranger and cop. He checked the perimeter, mind sifting through every threat. The forest felt alive, charged, as if a silent alarm had been tripped. Jack knelt, brushing his fingers over the print. Wide sole, heavy heel, military or tactical boots, not a local's worn farm shoe. There was no mistaking it. Someone had been here. Maybe still was. Ghost let out a low rumble, barely audible. Jack caught the glint of brass near the mossy stone, an expended shell casing. He picked it up, rolling the cold metal in his palm. Recent. No dust, no corrosion. Someone was armed. Someone had fired, maybe just to signal, maybe as a warning. He scanned the tree line, every branch and shadow a possible threat. The cave loomed before him. Jack hesitated. Ghost's body language shifted. Hackles high, every muscle coiled, tail low and alert. Jack read it instantly. Don't go in. Not yet. He circled back to the shack, Ghost at his side, ears swiveling. The tension was a living thing now, pressing in. Inside, Jack locked the door, double-checked every window. The journal and map still lay open, but Jack's attention snapped to the stone fireplace, where the mortar seemed uneven, a strange line running beneath the soot. He remembered his grandfather's habit, hiding things in plain sight. He pried at the loose stone with a hunting knife. It gave way, revealing a small tin box caked in ash. Inside, a folded scrap of paper, covered in numbers and cryptic letters, and a tarnished brass compass, its needle spinning lazily as if searching for true north. The cipher looked like code, military or Masonic, impossible to crack at a glance. The compass was heavier than it looked, engraved with initials, A.C. Arthur Callahan. Jack's heart hammered. He could almost hear his grandfather's gravelly voice. Some things aren't meant to stay buried, son. Ghost nudged the box, nose quivering. The bond between them was silent, but sure. Ghost felt the shift, too, as if the shack itself was bracing for something. As dusk bled into night, the mountainside took on a new menace. Shadows lengthened, merging into a velvet darkness. Jack kept the lamp low, shotgun propped against the door. Ghost stayed restless, ears flicking to each distant crackle. Then, headlights, far down the switchback road, weaving through the trees. Too late for a neighbor, too cautious for a lost hiker. The beams cut across the lower field, then vanished. Jack held his breath. Minutes passed. The shack's silence deepened. Then again, headlights moving slow, sweeping the woods. Jack's hands shook, just slightly, as he checked the windows. He didn't need Ghost's growl to tell him. They were being watched. Whoever had come for the cave wasn't giving up. The haunting had shifted, grown teeth. Now it wasn't just memories hunting Jack. There was something, someone, out there, waiting for him to make a move. Jack's mind churned, weighing options. He could call the sheriff, except the Callahan name wasn't popular in these parts, and Jack's badge was 3 counties away. He could pack up and run, except running had never solved a thing in his life. And then there was Ghost, steady and stubborn, refusing to leave Jack's side even when the dog's instincts screamed danger. Later, as midnight pressed in, Jack sat with the old journal in his lap, Ghost curled at his feet, the cipher and compass between them. The silence was dense, absolute, except for Ghost's slow, steady breathing. Jack's grief was still a living wound, but tonight it was joined by something else, an old, familiar pulse of fear. He let his eyes fall shut, and in the darkness, memories pressed close. Sarah's laughter, the color of her hair in morning sun, the way she'd reached for him when the world slipped away, the smell of cordite from a dozen battlefields, the sound of his grandfather's stories, late into Appalachian nights. He saw them all, ghosts among shadows, pressing him forward. And beneath it all, one truth. He was a guardian now, not just of land or legacy, but of something fragile and unfinished. The haunting, for once, was not about loss, but about what he might still save. Ghost stirred, shifting his weight, a subtle reminder. Jack wasn't alone, not tonight. Out in the forest, the wind rose again, carrying with it the sound of something moving through the brush. Jack's hand went to Ghost's head, grounding himself in the present, in the steady warmth of his only companion. Tomorrow he would start searching for answers. But tonight, he listened, heart beating in rhythm with the land, with the silent promise that whatever hunted him was not the only thing with teeth. In the deep Appalachian dark, a battered man and a loyal dog kept watch together, waiting for whatever dawn might bring. Jack woke before the first light, surrounded by the faded scent of wood smoke and old paper. The shack's walls felt closer now, pressing in with the weight of restless memories. Ghost was already awake, sitting quietly at the window, eyes fixed on the woods beyond, as if he could see the remnants of every shadow that crossed their land. The mountain was slow to surrender the night. The chill hung in the air, filling Jack's lungs with every breath. He reached for the battered journal and the coded map, tracing the ragged edge of a page as the lantern's light struggled against the gloom. Outside, the world was silent except for a few tentative bird calls, cautious, wary, as if the land itself was uncertain of morning. Jack poured himself black coffee from an old enamel pot, letting the bitterness ground him in the present. He stared at the symbols, the cryptic notes, Ashford's burden, hidden vaults, warnings scrawled in a hand too familiar to ignore. Each word was a stone in his chest, but the hardest to bear were the ones unwritten. He tried and failed not to think of Sarah. Her memory drifted in uninvited, as it always did in the quiet. He saw her as she was before the illness, strong, bright, stubborn as summer heat, her laughter echoing down old city sidewalks. And he saw her at the end, frail, bone-thin, hands clutching his in a final act of faith. Her voice came back to him in fragments, soft but insistent. "Find something worth saving, Jack. Don't get stuck." Ghost settled beside him, head on Jack's boot, the heat of his body anchoring Jack to the here and now. The dog didn't ask for explanations. He didn't shy away from grief or guilt. Ghost simply stayed, quiet and present, an unspoken promise that Jack didn't have to bear it all alone. Jack thumbed through the journal, stopping at a page where Arthur's words blurred, crossed out and rewritten. There were stories of the war, men lost to darkness, gold hidden and cursed, the land passed down not as a blessing, but as a warning. Jack wondered if Arthur had ever slept easy in this place. He wondered if anyone ever had. The hours dragged by, slow and heavy. Jack forced himself to walk the property, keeping Ghost close. The trees towered overhead, roots twisting through old stone walls, their branches catching the morning light in shards. Every step reminded Jack of the distance between the man he'd been, a soldier, a husband, and the one he was now, trying to stitch together a future from the tattered remnants of his past. He stopped at the mouth of the cave. The mist lingered, curling around his boots. Jack squinted into the darkness, searching for answers, or maybe for forgiveness. He ran his hand over the rough rock, feeling the cold bite of stone. Ghost circled the entrance, nose twitching, then returned to Jack's side as if to say, "Not yet." Back in the shack, Jack sat at the scarred kitchen table, lantern hissing low. He laid out the cipher, the compass, the map, trying to make sense of patterns and codes that refused to reveal themselves. Frustration built, a dull ache behind his eyes. He cursed under his breath, but the words fell flat in the empty room. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. Jack leaned back, staring at the sagging ceiling. He let his mind drift to Arthur's stories, the ones he'd heard as a boy. Tales of haunted caves, hidden fortunes, curses that chased men through generations. He'd laughed at them then, but now, in the heart of these mountains, the stories felt closer to truth than he wanted to admit. As dusk approached, Jack felt his resolve waver. He closed his eyes, searching for strength, but all he found was exhaustion. His hands shook. Grief rose, sharp and unexpected, a wave that threatened to drag him under. He pressed his fist to his mouth, willing the pain to pass. Then Ghost nudged his leg, gentle, persistent. Jack opened his eyes to meet the dog's amber gaze. There was no judgment in Ghost, no pity, just a steady presence, unwavering. Jack reached down, his hand resting on Ghost's broad head, feeling the roughness of fur beneath his palm. The world steadied, if only for a moment. Night came fast, draping the shack in deep blue. Jack lit another lantern, the small flame casting just enough light to keep the dark at bay. He set the journal aside and watched Ghost stretch out on the rug, a silent sentinel. Jack's chest eased just a little. There was comfort in the ordinary, in the slow turning of another day. He thought about the land, about inheritance, about curses and burdens. Maybe he'd never find what Arthur wanted him to see. Maybe the answers didn't matter as much as the act of searching, in the hush of the Appalachian night. Jack felt the weight of memory, yes, but also the faintest trace of hope. Not redemption, not yet, but a beginning. Jack sat with Ghost as the lamp guttered and the stars pressed close. The world pared down to dog, man, and the quiet hum of unfinished business. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long while, he was willing to see. Jack drove the rusted Chevy into Ashford just as the sun peeled the last of the fog from the valley. The mountains were gold and green in the morning light. The road winding past broken fences and whitewashed mailboxes. Memories pressed into every curve. Ghost rode shotgun. Head out the window, tongue lolling as the wind teased his fur. For a moment, Jack almost forgot the weight on his shoulders. But the journal and compass on the passenger seat reminded him. There was unfinished business that refused to stay buried. Ashford was a town of cracked sidewalks and slow mornings, where everybody knew the Callahan name, even if most had forgotten the stories behind it. Jack parked in front of the library, a squat red brick building with a hand-lettered sign, and slipped the journal into his jacket. Ghost followed, close at his side, eyes watchful and steady. Inside, Eleanor Hayes stood behind the counter, gray hair pinned in a tidy bun, thick glasses perched on her nose as she catalogued a stack of returns. Her eyes lifted, sharp and clear as a hawk's, and a tired smile creased her face. "Well, I'll be Jack Callahan back in Ashford," she said, her voice both welcome and wary. "Didn't expect to see you before first frost." Jack managed a nod. "Didn't expect to be here myself." He held out the battered journal, watching her reaction. "You were always close to my grandfather, Eleanor. I think he left me something I'm supposed to figure out." Eleanor hesitated, her fingers trembling as she took the book. She opened to the first page, reading the name, Arthur Callahan, her eyes softening. "He told me if anyone could carry Ashford's burden, it'd be you. But I hoped you'd never have to." She glanced at Ghost, who pressed his head against her knee in silent greeting. "And you brought company. Good. You'll need it, Jack." Jack lowered his voice. "What do you know about the cave, Eleanor, and all this talk of gold and curses?" Eleanor gestured for him to follow her into the small back office. Stacks of files and local histories lined the walls. She poured 2 mugs of tea, hands shaking only slightly, and began, "There's more truth in the old stories than most care to admit. The cave's been whispered about since the Civil War. Gold hidden by Union men gone rogue, disappearances, men who searched for treasure and never came back. Some say your grandfather's family was cursed because of what they kept secret." She handed him a yellowed envelope, sealed and heavy in his palm. "Arthur left this for you. Told me to wait until you started asking questions." Jack tore the seal. Inside was a letter, written in a hurried, slanted hand. Arthur spoke of threats from a company, Apex Resource Management. "They want what's under the mountain, Jack. They think they can buy it. Or take it. Don't trust anyone wearing a suit in this town. And don't go to the sheriff." The last line was a plea. "Don't let Sarah's suffering be for nothing. There's more here than gold. There's truth." Jack's vision blurred, his jaw clenched. Sarah's name, inked by his grandfather, burned like a fresh wound. Eleanor leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Your grandfather never believed Sarah's death was just bad luck. Not after the threats started. He knew too much, Jack. Maybe you do too." Jack wanted to push away, to run from the heat of his own anger. But the words stuck. He glanced at Ghost, whose calm gaze anchored him. "I keep thinking I could have done more. Protected her. Protected all of us." Eleanor touched his hand, gentle but firm. "Guilt's an old ghost in this valley. It'll eat you alive if you let it. But Arthur didn't send you here to suffer. He sent you to finish what he couldn't." A clock ticked in the stillness, marking a moment that felt like a new beginning or a return to an old war. Jack thanked Eleanor and stepped out into the sunlight, letter heavy in his pocket. Ghost matched his stride, head high, tail swishing through dust. The world felt sharper now, each sound, each glance from a passerby, laced with suspicion. As they walked back to the truck, Jack spotted a dark sedan parked by the grocery, windows tinted, engine idling. A man in a suit sat behind the wheel, eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses. Jack stiffened, feeling the old instinct for danger coil in his gut. Ghost's lip curled, low and silent. Back at the shack, Jack paced the creaking floorboards, mind racing. He wanted to believe it was all just paranoia, a byproduct of grief and too many sleepless nights, but Eleanor's warning and Arthur's letter kept replaying in his head. Apex wasn't just after old gold. They were after something deeper, more dangerous. Maybe they'd already cost him more than he knew. He sat at the table, Ghost at his feet, the journal, map, and letter spread before him. The past clawed at his thoughts. Arthur's stories, Sarah's last months, the steady encroachment of outsiders with hungry eyes. Every choice felt heavy. To fight would be to invite danger, not just to himself, but to everyone left in Ashford who still remembered what the Callahan name stood for. He stared at the coded map, tracing the lines with his finger. Ghost nudged his leg, tail thumping. Jack breathed in, slow and deep, battling the urge to walk away, to let the mountain swallow its secrets once more. But somewhere in the quiet, in the weight of old wounds and new fears, Jack found a thread of resolve. Maybe he couldn't change the past, couldn't save everyone he'd lost. But he could finish this. He could stand his ground. For Sarah, for Arthur, for the battered land that had always belonged to men too stubborn to quit. Night fell slow and thick around the shack, but inside, a different kind of light began to grow. The next morning arrived brittle and gray, the sky promising rain. Jack stood on the porch with Ghost beside him, sipping lukewarm coffee from a cracked mug. Each sound from the woods seemed sharper, the silence more deliberate. He was used to being watched, from combat, from patrol cars, from hospital hallways, where hope came and went with the flickering of fluorescent lights. But this was different. The land itself seemed to tense beneath his boots, bracing for what came next. He spent the first hours of daylight rechecking locks and securing what little he owned. Ghost paced, restless, drawn again and again to the cave's mouth. Jack wondered if it was the promise of danger or the scent of something older, something neither man nor dog could name. A chill ran through him, not from fear, but from the realization that he was no longer alone in this fight. The day was halfway gone when Jack heard tires on gravel. He glanced out the window, catching the glint of chrome as a black SUV rolled to a stop at the bottom of his drive. Ghost's fur bristled, a silent warning. Jack set his mug down, slid the pistol into his waistband, and stepped out onto the porch. A man climbed out, crisp and deliberate, his suit perfectly pressed, hair sharp as a razor part. He looked like money, or the threat of money. A man who'd never once lost sleep over what his hands had done. Jack recognized the type before the man even spoke. "Mr. Callahan?" The man's voice was friendly, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Leland Vance. I represent Apex Resource Management." Jack said nothing, letting the silence stretch. Vance continued, undeterred, pulling a folder from his briefcase. "I know your time's valuable, so I'll be brief. We're prepared to offer a generous sum for your property, far above market value. Enough, I imagine, to put your troubles behind you." Jack's jaw clenched. "I'm not selling." Vance's smile thinned. He leaned closer, voice a shade softer. "Jack, we both know this land is nothing but a burden. We can help you move on. Nobody needs to get hurt. Ghost stepped forward, positioning himself between the two men, eyes fixed on Vance. For a heartbeat, Vance seemed to reconsider his approach, then recovered. "You're making this harder than it has to be, Mr. Callahan. This land, it's not what you think. People who hold on to it have a way of winding up unhappy." Jack didn't flinch. "Get off my property." Vance's mask slipped, just for a second. Something cold flickered in his eyes. He left the folder on the porch rail. "Read it. Call if you change your mind. We're patient, Jack, but not forever." He turned, walking away with deliberate calm. Ghost's low growl followed him down the steps, the sound stretching through the air long after the SUV disappeared back down the road. Jack picked up the folder, flipping through its contents. A glossy sales contract, property maps, a sheet listing community benefits. At the bottom was a veiled threat. Apex reserves the right to pursue all legal remedies in case of non-compliance. He tossed it onto the kitchen table, anger pulsing beneath his skin. He didn't sleep that night, pacing the creaking floorboards, the memory of Vance's smile gnawing at him. Ghost prowled from window to window, alert to every passing shadow. Around midnight, headlights swept across the lower field. Jack killed the lamp, heart pounding, watching from the darkness as the SUV idled at the end of his drive before slipping back into the trees. Jack knew he couldn't face this alone. In the morning, he pulled out his battered phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. After 3 rings, a sleepy, familiar voice answered. "Rico Diaz, who wants trouble this early?" "Marcus, it's Jack. I need your help." A pause, then warmth. "Always. Where are you?" Jack explained, giving only the barest details. Rico was former Army, now a tech whiz who could sniff out trouble in a hurricane. "Can you get here by tonight?" Jack asked, voice tight. "Just say the word. I'll bring gear." Relief warred with anxiety. Jack hung up and glanced at Ghost, who wagged his tail once, slow and sure, as if to say, "Good call." By midday, Jack spotted men, 2, maybe 3, watching from the tree line. They wore work jackets, but their posture screamed security, not logging crew. Ghost kept his eyes on them, body tense. That evening, Rico arrived in a mud-splattered truck, gear bag slung over one shoulder. He took one look at Jack, then at the shack, and shook his head. "You always did know how to pick a fight, Hermano." They turned the shack into a command center, spreading out the coded maps, the journal, and everything Jack had gathered. Ghost circled them, ever the silent guardian. Rico's fingers danced over his laptop, scanning frequencies, tracing signals. "You're up against pros," he said. "These aren't just hired goons. Apex wants what's under that mountain, and they're not waiting around." Jack felt the lines of his old life converge. The grief, the anger, the need for justice. For Sarah, for Arthur. For every piece of himself he'd tried and failed to bury. This wasn't just about gold anymore. It was about truth, about standing up one last time. Outside, the wind rose, sweeping through the trees. Jack met Ghost's gaze, drawing strength from the dog's silent loyalty. Whatever lay beneath this mountain, treasure, curse, or something older, he would face it head on. And this time, he wouldn't be standing alone. Rain battered the shack's tin roof, turning the mountain's dirt paths to slick rivers of mud. Jack, Rico, and Ghost hunched over the battered kitchen table, every inch cluttered with Arthur's maps, the coded journal, and the tin boxes now dusted off and cracked open. Ghost lay at Jack's feet, tail sweeping back and forth with each new clue. Outside, the world felt sealed off. No cell signal, no neighbors, nothing but the hush of storm and the ever-present hush of old secrets. Rico adjusted his glasses and traced the cipher from the tin box with a calloused finger. Your grandfather was paranoid and a genius, Hermano, but this is old school. Polyalphabetic ciphers, double-blind routes, and a compass code. This is Civil War spycraft, not just family folklore. Jack watched the rain bead against the window, listening to the steady hum of ghosts breathing. He wanted to make sure only someone who understood what was at stake would solve it. Not just anyone after a payday. Rico nodded, eyes darting between pages, his army tattoo peeking from his sleeve as he worked. You see this? He pointed to a set of initials, CA, and the line, Ashford's debt must not leave the blood. Colonel Ashford, Rico muttered. This is older than Arthur. You know what you're sitting on, Jack? History, Jack replied. But what kind of history? He still wasn't sure. For hours the storm raged and the two men worked, ghost alert to every pop and groan of the old house. By mid-afternoon, the coded map had revealed a crude overlay of the mountain's hidden features. The cave entrance, you know, isn't the only one, Rico said. Look here, these marks and this. This is a schematic, not of gold, but of traps, tunnels, pressure plates, old-school defense. If Apex tries to come in the way you did, they'll never make it to the vault. Jack's jaw tensed. Unless they know more than we do. A sudden bark from Ghost snapped their focus. The shepherd had pushed aside an old box near the fireplace, pawing at a loose stone. Jack knelt, hands shaking as he pried it loose, revealing another tin box, smaller and heavier than the first. Inside, a faded letter, a brass key, and a folded diagram stained with watermarks and age. Rico read the letter aloud, voice tight. To my heir, this land is blood-bought. The gold is real, but it's not what will save you. It was hidden to expose those who betrayed their country, the men who sold secrets, left their own for dead. You must keep it from those who would use it for greed. If you're reading this, you're all I have left. Use the key, follow the true north. Ashford's confession is your guide, not your curse. AC. They spread the diagram out. It was a blueprint, old, annotated in multiple hands, detailing an intricate network of defense mechanisms, pressure plates, collapsing tunnels, false vaults, and there, at the bottom, a hand-drawn vault door with a matching brass keyhole. Jack let the brass key turn in his hand, heavy as a headstone. Ghost whined softly, pressing his muzzle against Jack's arm. Jack closed his eyes, letting the memory of Arthur's rough hands, Sarah's voice, and every loss he'd carried settle into the present moment. He was tired of running, tired of losing. Rico clapped his hand on Jack's shoulder. We can do this, brother, but we'll need every edge we can get. Apex isn't just sending suits anymore. I intercepted radio chatter. They're bringing in drilling equipment. They think they can blast their way through. Jack felt a surge, not hope exactly, but righteous anger. They want what doesn't belong to them. They think everything has a price. They're wrong. That night, as the storm faded, the shack became a fortress. Rico installed makeshift surveillance gear, using thermal sensors and signal jammers. Ghost patrolled, nose pressed to the crack beneath the door, every muscle tense. Jack cleaned his pistol, his old Army Ranger badge catching the lamplight. For the first time since Sarah died, he felt something close to purpose, the weight of his grief shifting to something hard-edged and usable. Before dawn, they moved. Ghost led the way through the woods, skirting the cave's main entrance, nose twitching as he picked up the scent trail laid down by Arthur decades before. The path was nearly invisible, overgrown, buried by seasons of leaves, but Ghost found every turn. Jack followed, heart in his throat, Rico bringing up the rear with the gear. They reached a narrow fissure behind a stand of ancient oaks, half swallowed by moss. Rico slid the brass key into the lock, heart pounding. It turned with a reluctant click. The door opened on a passage lined with stone and timber, the air musty and untouched by modern light. Inside, Jack moved slow, scanning for traps with Ghost pressed close to his thigh. The map and the blueprint matched, tripwires, a collapsing ceiling rig, a false wall. Only Ghost's uncanny instinct saved them from a pressure plate near the final tunnel. He froze, blocking Jack with his body until Rico found and disabled the ancient mechanism. The passage opened onto a small chamber. Stone walls etched with names, a battered Union Army trunk, and a single lantern resting atop. Jack picked it up, finding a final note from Arthur. "This is the truth, Jack. What you do with it is your legacy." For a moment, Jack let himself feel the full weight of the generations behind him. Soldiers, outcasts, men who'd paid for survival with their secrets. Ghost pressed against his side, solid and real. "We're almost there," Jack whispered, and even as fear twisted through him, he knew. Whatever came next, he would face it with open eyes. The morning came heavy with fog, blanketing the forest in a hush so complete it seemed the world itself was holding its breath. Jack moved quietly through the brush with Rico and Ghost at his side, every sense tuned sharp as a blade. Behind them, the shack was nothing but a dark smudge in the gray. Before them, the path to the hidden entrance yawned like an open secret. Jack gripped the brass key, knuckles white. They worked fast, moving gear down into the passage, careful to leave no tracks that would betray their presence. Every few minutes, Rico paused to scan the airwaves. "They're moving in heavy," he muttered, listening to static and clipped voices. "Apex is bringing in a drill crew and at least 2 armed men. We're running out of time." Ghost ranged ahead, muzzle low, body fluid and silent as a shadow. Jack watched the dog's movements, trusting them more than any equipment. It was Ghost who stopped, suddenly, ears high, tail straight. Jack followed his gaze to a line of disturbed earth near a rotted beam, fresh boot prints, deep and hurried. Someone else had found the hidden path. Jack's pulse surged, a tight knot of fear and focus. He signaled Rico to stay low, hand on his weapon, every muscle coiled. For a moment, all he could hear was his own heartbeat, the soft scuffle of Ghost's paws. The cave's breath chilled his face as he led them down. Inside, the air was thick, laced with dust and secrets. The passage was narrow, the old stone closing in, the only light the dull orange of their lanterns. Jack kept the coded map clutched tight, nerves jangling. He'd walked through plenty of darkness in his life, but this was different. Here, every footstep felt like it carried the weight of generations. They reached the first checkpoint, a half-collapsed shaft, the ceiling held up by splintered timbers. Jack and Rico moved slow, testing the floor for pressure plates, just as Ghost stopped dead, blocking Jack with his body. Rico crouched and spotted a wire, barely visible in the gloom, a trap primed to bring the whole ceiling down. He worked fast, steady hands and steady nerves, disabling it while Jack watched the rear, the silence pressing. The deeper they went, the closer the sense of pursuit became. Voices echoed behind, boots scraping stone, flashlights flickering in the dark. Ghost's body tensed, hackles high. They'd been discovered. The three picked up the pace, Jack's mind racing with every step. They reached a fork, map confirming the right-hand passage led to the vault, the left to a dead end. Jack pulled Rico aside, voice low. "We have to move, now. They're close." They sprinted the last 100 feet, the cave floor sloping beneath them, until they reached a heavy iron door, the one Arthur's map had promised. Jack slid the brass key into the lock. For a heart-stopping second, it stuck. Then, with a groan, the door swung open onto a vault, its walls lined with stacked crates, rotting uniforms, and in the center, a chest banded in iron. Jack barely had time to catch his breath before footsteps thundered behind. Vance's voice echoed, sharp and triumphant. "Well, you boys found it for me after all." Jack whirled as Vance stepped into the light, gun drawn, 2 men flanking him. His eyes glinted cold in the lantern's glow. "Drop your weapons. This is the end of the line." Rico's jaw tightened, hands up but eyes darting, weighing options. Ghost growled, a low vibration in the earth. Jack glanced at the vault, then at the map, his mind flicking through Arthur's notes about the defense systems. He saw it then, a small panel on the wall, almost hidden by years of soot and dust. "Go," Jack whispered to Rico, keeping his voice steady. Ghost crouched, ready to spring. In one smooth motion, Rico flung his bag toward the crates, distracting the guards, while Jack lunged for the panel, slamming his fist against the mechanism. Instantly, a grinding noise filled the chamber. The vault door slammed shut, cutting them off from the outside men. But Vance was inside, gun still pointed. He grinned, the threat clear in his eyes. "You Callahans never did know when to quit." Jack stared him down, every wound and loss burned into his memory. "You want the gold? You'll have to take it." Vance laughed, a hollow sound in the stone. "It was never about the gold, Jack. It was about control. Your grandfather knew that. So did your wife in the end." Jack's breath caught, grief and fury burning through him. "You leave her out of this." But Vance only smiled, gun steady. "It's all the same fight, Jack. The only difference is who gets to walk away." For a heartbeat, Jack felt the betrayal of history, how Arthur's death, Sarah's suffering, even his own nightmares, had all tangled into this moment. Generations trapped by secrets, driven by greed and violence. The cave trembled, dust raining down. Somewhere above, Rico's signal jammer whined, static crackling. Ghost tensed at Jack's side, every muscle ready. Outside, the echo of drilling filled the tunnels, a reminder that even this standoff was on borrowed time. Jack met Ghost's eyes. An understanding passed between them, wordless and complete. No more running, no more hiding. As Vance cocked the pistol, Ghost lunged, a blur of muscle and purpose. The fight was far from over. The cave, the past, the men, everything was coming undone. But Jack was ready to see it through, even if it meant losing everything, except the truth. The walls of the vault seemed to shrink as the echoes of chaos filled the cave. The lantern's glow trembled, throwing wild shadows across the crates and stone. Jack braced himself, every instinct alive to the threat. Vance's gun flickered from Jack to Rico and back again. The drilling overhead thundered, every vibration a reminder they were running out of time. Ghost circled wide, teeth bared, hackles bristling, amber eyes never leaving Vance. In that thick, electric silence, every breath felt like it could tip the balance. Jack's mind worked furiously. Arthur's blueprints, the defense mechanisms, the legacy he was meant to protect. Behind him, Rico inched toward the old trunk, trying not to draw the gunman's attention. "Back off," Vance spat, voice edged with triumph. "I warned you. You could have taken the money and walked away clean, Callahan. But men like you, always too stubborn for your own good." Jack took a slow breath, trying to steady the anger roiling in his chest. "You think this is about gold?" he said, keeping his voice low. "You've never understood anything about this place, or about people like Arthur." Vance's grip tightened. "People like Arthur cost me years, Jack. I'm not walking away empty-handed." As he spoke, Ghost slid closer along the wall, every muscle poised. Vance's attention was fixed on Jack, on the prize just out of reach. Rico's hand brushed the false floorboard. Just as Jack remembered the old lever Arthur had diagrammed, he took a step to the right, nudging the panel with his boot. A click echoed, sharp, unmistakable. Suddenly, the room jolted. Heavy bars dropped over the vault entrance. The hum of machinery sounded from the darkness. Vance spun, eyes wide. Rico lunged, knocking a crate off the stack. In that split second, Ghost shot forward, jaws snapping on Vance's wrist. The gun clattered to the stone. Vance roared, struggling, but Ghost held fast, pinning the man to the ground with a force that was all survival, all protection. Jack rushed forward, kicking the weapon away and locking Vance's other arm behind his back. Vance spat curses, writhing, but Jack pressed him down, years of training settling into muscle memory. Rico moved quick, hauling open the battered trunk. Inside were stacks of old documents, proof of Union corruption, Ashford's confession, evidence that would topple Apex's claim to the land and expose every bribe, every threat. He held up a packet, breathless. "This is it, Jack. This is what they killed for." Outside the vault, the drilling screeched, metal against rock, then fell silent as the jammed entrance collapsed under its own weight. Dust and stone rained from above. Somewhere in the distance, the shouts of Vance's men turned to panic. Then, the sound of boots, louder, closer. Jack's heart hammered. He and Rico dragged Vance to his feet, shoving him against the wall. Ghost stood guard, teeth bared, chest heaving. Jack pressed the old army badge into Vance's hand, his voice rough. "This land isn't for sale, and neither is the truth." Before Vance could reply, a new voice echoed down the tunnel, sharp, commanding, unmistakably federal. "FBI, drop your weapons, show yourselves." Relief hit Jack like a wave. He stepped forward, hands up, calling out. Rico did the same. Within moments, flashlights filled the chamber, agents pouring in, weapons drawn. Vance tried to run, but Ghost blocked him, forcing the man to the floor with a guttural growl. Two agents cuffed Vance, reading him his rights as he spit threats and denials. The others swept the vault, gathering evidence, cataloging every document, every artifact. In the flood of movement and sound, Jack finally let his shoulders fall. An agent in a Navy windbreaker pulled him aside, nodding at Ghost. "We've had eyes on this place since Eleanor called. She told us everything. Apex, the threats, the evidence. You did the right thing, Mr. Callahan." Jack nodded, silent, eyes drifting to the battered chest. The weight of history finally lifted from his shoulders. Rico clapped him on the back, face split in a tired grin. "You're one stubborn bastard, Jack. But you did it." In the hush that followed, Jack found himself staring at Ghost. The dog sat, head tilted, tongue lolling, gaze soft now that the danger had passed. Jack knelt, gathering Ghost into his arms. For a moment, it was just the two of them in the silent cave, man and dog, the last of a long, battered line. Later, as the FBI led Vance and his men out into the dawn, Jack lingered in the vault, running his hand over the old Union chest. The air was cool and clear, washed clean by the storm. In the shifting light, the scars and secrets of his family's past finally found their place. Jack stood, shoulders squared, the ache of old wounds tempered by something close to peace. He knew now that the treasure he'd fought for was never gold. It was this: truth, justice, and the silent, unwavering bond he shared with Ghost, two souls who'd survived and saved together. Morning on the mountain was a gentle hush, sunlight threading through the pines, dappling the earth that had witnessed so much pain and resolve. The previous night's chaos left behind a new kind of silence, not the old, haunted quiet, but something cleaner, clearer, as if the land itself had exhaled after generations holding its breath. Jack stood outside the shack, Ghost at his side, both watching as federal agents moved in steady rhythm, loading crates of evidence and historic documents from the cave. They worked with careful hands, some pausing to tip their hats or kneel beside Ghost, who sniffed each stranger with the patient caution of a soldier who's seen too much. Rico was coordinating with the agents, showing them hidden spots on the map, his energy bright despite the fatigue lining his face. For the first time in months, maybe years, Jack felt still. He breathed deep, letting the clean mountain air clear his head. It was strange, after so long being hunted by the past, to feel it loosen its grip. Inside, Jack spread out Arthur's last letter, the coded map, the battered Union chest now emptied of secrets. He stared at the gold coins, dull and heavy, centuries old, and thought of what his grandfather had written: "The gold will not save you. It is proof, nothing more." He made his decision quietly, without fanfare. That afternoon, Jack signed the papers that would turn the Callahan land and the cave over to the state as a protected historical site. The chest of gold, minus a single coin, was donated to a fund for local veterans' medical care, a new foundation bearing Sarah's name. Jack knew it was what she would have wanted: a legacy not of riches, but of healing and service. Rico clapped him on the shoulder, grinning wide. "You ever think about running for mayor, Jack? Folks around here could use someone with your backbone." Jack just shook his head, half a smile creeping onto his lips. "I've had enough trouble for a lifetime. This place needs healing, not another fight." He looked down at Ghost, who bumped his hand, tail wagging slow. "I think we both need peace." The story of Apex's downfall traveled quick. The local news ran headlines about buried gold, lost war crimes, and corporate corruption laid bare. But Jack shunned the attention, turning his focus to restoring the shack, clearing the old trails, and sitting long evenings on the porch with Ghost, letting the dusk settle over them like a worn blanket. Once, he drove into town, parking beneath the ancient oak outside the library. Eleanor met him on the steps, her eyes shining. She pressed a bundle of old photographs into his hands, images of Arthur as a young man, Sarah holding a puppy, even one of Jack as a boy, grin wide and fierce. "Your family has always belonged to these mountains," she whispered. "You kept your promise." He lingered at the library steps, watching families come and go, children laughing, old men nodding in quiet respect. For years, Jack had believed the Callahan name meant trouble, meant burden. Now, it meant something else: endurance, service, a legacy that could finally breathe in the open. One evening, as fireflies blinked between the trees, Jack took the brass key and a single gold coin to Sarah's grave at the edge of the property. The grass was long, the stone simple and unadorned. He knelt, resting the coin and key at the base of her marker. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The gesture was enough, a letting go, a promise kept. Ghost lay beside him, chin on his paws, eyes closed in silent witness. Jack sat for a long time, feeling the ache in his chest soften, replaced by something gentle, a gratitude for what remained. The pain would never vanish, not entirely, but it no longer owned him. It moved through him like the wind, part of the landscape, no longer the whole of it. As summer deepened, Jack saw the land transform. The shack became a home, fresh paint, sturdy locks, laughter in the evenings when Rico visited. Tourists sometimes wandered up the old road, curious about the cave, but Jack kept his distance, offering advice and a cold drink, then retreating to his porch, Ghost's head on his knee. He watched storms roll over the ridge, counted stars, let himself rest. Sometimes on the quietest nights, he felt Sarah's presence beside him, the warmth of her hand in his, the memory not of loss but of love. Steady, enduring, quietly victorious. Jack understood now. True legacy was never measured in gold or land, but in the courage to face the dark, in the willingness to heal, to forgive, to begin again. Ghost seemed to know it too, curling beside Jack in the hush of each new dawn, content simply to belong. And so, with each passing season, the wounds healed. Not perfectly, not all at once, but enough. Enough to stay, enough to love, enough to let the story move forward, not as a burden, but as a gift. Sometimes, when the world grows quiet and dusk hangs low over the Appalachians, I find myself thinking about men like Jack Callahan and dogs like Ghost. Maybe you do too. Maybe there's something in you, some ache or memory or hope, that brings you to these old mountains, if only in your mind. Jack's story isn't about gold, or violence, or winning and losing. It's about what happens after the storms, when the secrets are dragged into daylight, and a man has to decide what he'll carry forward, and what he'll finally set down. I suppose if you've made it to the end of this story, you understand what I mean. I think about Jack in the early morning, sitting on the porch of that once-forgotten shack, the wood finally sanded smooth beneath his hands, paint fresh and hopeful against the wild green. Ghost dozes beside him, muzzle twitching with dreams, and every so often Jack leans down to scratch his ear, as if to remind himself that he's still here, that some things are worth holding on to. Most mornings, Jack walks the property line, boots in dew-soaked grass, his eyes tracing the horizon as if reading messages in the mist. Sometimes Rico joins him, trading stories of old battles, bad coffee, and better days. Sometimes Eleanor comes by, bringing a tin of biscuits and a warm laugh, settling on the porch to reminisce about Arthur or Sarah, or the way summer smells after rain. Neighbors stop by too, curious at first, then comfortable, drawn by the steady, unhurried peace that seems to grow from the land now. Some bring troubles, a broken fence, a lost dog, a worry they can't shake. Jack listens, not because he's searching for meaning, but because he's finally learned how to stay. He offers what he can, a place to sit, a cup of coffee, a silence that's safe. The land changes with the seasons, just as we do. Wildflowers return to the fields, bees weaving gold in the long grass. The cave, now marked by a small plaque, draws visitors who speak in low voices, careful not to disturb the hush. Children press hands to the old stone, imagining secrets and heroics. Veterans visit the foundation set up in Sarah's name, some leaving notes, others only a nod. Sometimes Jack watches them from the porch, Ghost at his side. He doesn't say much, he never did. But there's a softness to his gaze now, a sense of belonging that has nothing to do with blood or duty, and everything to do with having survived, with having chosen to remain. As for Ghost, the dog grows a little older each year. His muzzle is grayer now, his gait slower, but his eyes remain sharp. He still rises at dawn, ready for whatever the day brings. A stray deer in the yard, a grandchild's laughter, the simple music of wind in the trees. He's not just a guardian anymore. He's a companion, a reminder that love, no matter how battered, endures. In the evenings, when the sky turns violet and the cicadas sing, Jack sits in the fading light, letting the quiet wrap around him. Sometimes he speaks aloud, as if to Sarah or Arthur or to the ghosts of the mountain itself. More often, he simply listens, to the creak of the porch swing, the sigh of ghost settling at his feet, the hum of the world carrying on. If you're reading this, maybe you're like Jack. Maybe you've known loss, the kind that hollows you out and leaves you wandering. Or maybe you're more like Ghost, fierce in your loyalty, carrying your own quiet scars. Maybe you've been both. Or maybe you're just looking for a story that says it's all right to stay, even when it hurts, even when you don't know what comes next. Because sometimes the treasures we inherit aren't gold or land, but the chance to set things right, for ourselves and for others who came before us. Sometimes healing is slow, and forgiveness comes in pieces, and the only way forward is to keep showing up day after day in small, stubborn acts of kindness. If this story touched you, if you found a bit of yourself in these pages, share it with someone who might need hope today. Let them know they're not alone. Not in their pain, not in their longing, not in their search for meaning. Like Jack and Ghost, we all carry scars, but together, we can unearth meaning in places everyone else gave up on. We can learn, finally, how to stay. So linger here a while if you need to. Take a breath. Look at the world around you, the familiar, the broken, the beautiful. And when you're ready, step back into your own story, carrying forward what matters and letting the rest become the quiet music of memory. Thank you for walking this road with me, friend. May you always find the strength to begin again.